and empathy, but unfortunately, by default, we apply it only within a narrow circle of blood relatives and allies and cute little fuzzy animals. But over the course of history, one can see the circle expanding to embrace the village, then the clan, the tribe, the nation, other races, both sexes, children, and perhaps eventually other species. This just raises the question of what expanded the circle over the course of history, and I think the technologies of cosmopolitanism form a plausible answer. As people spend more time traveling, consuming history, literature, drama, and journalism, they feel more immediately what the lives of other people are like, and therefore are less likely to demonize them. And indeed, there's some experimental evidence that shows that when people adopt the perspective of a real or fictitious individual, they experience more sympathy, not just for that individual, but for the entire category that that individual represents. Finally, there's the escalator of reason, the possibility that the growth of literacy, education, and public discourse have encouraged people to think more abstractly and more universally. They rise above their parochial vantage point, which makes it harder to privilege their own interests over others. This encourages them also to stand back and to recognize the futility of cycles of violence, and increasingly to see violence as a problem to be solved rather than as a contest to be won. The final question that I'll raise is why, if there are 4 distinct forces that have brought violence down, why should they all be seemingly moving in the same direction? And I think that the answer is that violence is what game theorists call a social dilemma. It's always tempting for an aggressor to exploit a victim, but of course it's ruinous for the victim. Since over the long run, anyone could be a victim or an aggressor, they often change places, everyone would be better off if all parties renounced violence at the same time. The dilemma is, how do you get the other guy to refrain from violence at the same time as you do? Because if you beat your swords into plowshares, but the other guy keeps his as swords, then you could find yourself at the wrong end of an invasion. One can well imagine that over the course of history, human experience and human ingenuity have gradually chipped away at this problem, just like we've dealt with other scourges of the human condition, like pestilence and hunger. And the common denominator among these 4 pacifying forces is that all of them increase the material, emotional, or cognitive incentives of all parties to avoid violence simultaneously. Well, whatever the best explanation of the decline of violence turns out to be, I think it has implications that are profound. One of them is that it calls for a reorientation of our efforts toward violence reduction from a moralistic mindset to an empirical mindset. That is, instead of just lamenting why is there war, perhaps we should also be asking why is there peace? Not just what are we doing wrong, but what have we been doing right? Because we have been doing something right, and it seems to me to be rather important to try to figure out what exactly it is. Also, the decline of violence calls for a reassessment of modernity, of the centuries-long trend that has eroded family, tribe, tradition, and religion, which have given way to individual rights, cosmopolitanism, reason, and science. Now, everyone acknowledges that modernity has brought us longer, healthier lives, less ignorance and superstition, and richer experiences. But there's always been a current of nostalgia and romanticism that has questioned the price. Is it worth it if we have to live in the shadow of terrorism, genocide, world wars, and nuclear weapons? However, if despite impressions, the long-term trend, though halting and incomplete, is that violence of all kinds is decreasing, I think that calls for a rehabilitation of the ideals of modernity and progress, and it's a cause for gratitude for the institutions of civilization and enlightenment that have made it possible. Thanks very much.
As always, absolutely perfect timing. So we have 20 minutes for questions. We only have one roving mic, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and cluster those questions to various locations. So can we see a sea of hands, please? Okay, so we have a cluster down here.
Yeah, I just wondered, do you think the news that came out this week that the EU has been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize is indicative of what you've been finding?
Yes, absolutely. And then, if I had more time, I would have actually brought that up, because of the Immanuel Kant's 3 contributors to peace, actually, I guess all 3 are implicitly acknowledged by the awarding of the Nobel Prize to the European Union, but particularly the counterintuitive ones of trade and an international community. Because the European Union was preceded by the European Common Market, not a political union, but merely an economic one. And the Common Market was preceded by the European Coal and Steel Board, which was narrower still, but was implemented in the wake of World War II, pretty much as a direct implementation of Kant's hypothesis. That, and also Adam Smith and Montesquieu and others, that if you have 2 countries that are enmeshed in a trading relationship, they will be less likely to attack each other, because it would be like attacking yourself. And they deliberately united France and Germany, and I think also Belgium and Italy, their former adversaries, into an economic union, originally just basically a free trade zone for the most strategic commodities, which then expanded to a relative free trade zone of the common market. Not just to increase affluence, but explicitly as a disincentive to war. And for all the problems of the European Union, they succeeded at that. European countries have not gone to war with each other. And I think that, although it's certainly been an occasion for a lot of derision, that the Nobel Committee made a justifiable decision, that a common market and then the political union may have been going a little too far, or the currency union, but certainly the idea of an international community and a free trade as pacifying forces, I think, is sound.